Hey friends, Ethan Fogg, Canandaigua Chamber of Commerce. I'm here with Carrie Boot from the United Way of Ontario County.
Hi, folks.
And you're viewing another installment of the 2021 Virtual Not-for-Profit Summit, presented by us and some other key investors that you'll learn about during the process. And you may also see online if you visit canandaiguachamber.com/summit. It's an important conversation. This is not the first summit, nor shall it be the last. We love getting together in person. We've all seen the news. It's pretty exciting. A lot of things have opened back up, but we're also mindful of the fact that labor issues and things like that, and that's directly relevant to the program today, that labor issues can affect your ability to attend an event in person in one location live this year, and we get it. So what we're recommending is pour yourself a cup of coffee or whatever works for you and whatever your boss will allow, and get comfortable, because this conversation is going to be relevant to you, the people that work for you, and perhaps the people you work for. Carrie, tell us more.
Our next session is Michelle Pedzik from Canandaigua National Bank talking about managing a virtual hybrid workplace. We've all done it. We're all working through it now. But now that we're doing it, how do we continue it? How do we make it productive and make sure that our employees are balancing that work-life life?
And keeping a sense of humor. Because it is a bold new world, ladies and gentlemen. I think a lot of us 2 years ago would have said never. We would never do it. We'd never let our teams do it. And we're here now. And we've discovered that some people are highly productive when they work remotely. We've discovered that perhaps some people need supports we didn't anticipate. So part of what today's program is going to do is hopefully inform those of us who either work remotely occasionally or those of us who supervise them, give us some tips and tricks as to how to help those people be the most successful in their remote or hybrid experience.
Because who knew that the most common phrase in 2020 was, "You're on mute."
Yeah, can you hear me now? Yeah. Is this thing on? So without any further ado, we hope your connectivity is strong and that your connection is smooth. And pour yourself a glass of something, coffee or whatever you can drink when you're on duty. And we'll see you on the street.
But we hope to see you live in 2022.
Well, hello there. My name is Michelle Pedzik, and I'm from Canandaigua National Bank and Trust Company. And I'm here today on behalf of the United Way's Not-for-Profit Conference to talk about managing a hybrid virtual workplace in the real world. So thank you for listening into my session. I'm going to talk a lot about us having a conversation. I realize with this recorded Zoom, we're not really having a conversation, but I would encourage you to stop and pause and take notes and think about some of the things that we're going to cover today. Just to kick things off, I know things have been incredibly interesting, tense, challenging, stressful over the last year and a half from the beginning of the pandemic. So I'm here hopefully to have a conversation to help you think about some things as we start to move back into the new normal. And we're going to cover a whole bunch of items such as, what is the landscape like right now? What are we talking about when we talk about remote workers or virtual environments or hybrid work arrangements? What are the positives or the pros or the negatives and cons of having a remote or hybrid workplace? And what kinds of things should you consider? And as well as some takeaways and some closing thoughts. So that's our agenda for our time together. So I want to kick things off, though, with a little bit of humor. And certainly collaboration is a big word and idea for us to all remember to think through. And we know that our employees over the last year and a half have really been productive in most cases. We know they're working hard and they're getting their work done. But one of the pieces that keeps coming up, but are we still collaborating? Are we connecting those that are new to our workplace with our culture and those kinds of things? So just a little bit of humor talking about collaboration, and really Zoom calls or other virtual conference calls can be challenging, and the whole am I on mute, am I not on mute concept, certainly we have to laugh when we think about these things. So let me set the stage and talk about the landscape. Pre-pandemic, our employees had a lot of expectations of us as employers, whether we're a small organization or we're a larger organization. And there are certain needs and wants that employees have. Certainly, employees want a nice space to work in pre-pandemic, particularly some of those with great bells and whistles and some fun colors. And, that was an expectation, particularly for some of our newer employees that are entering the workforce. Having the ability to have open collaboration spaces, for example, or obviously really great technology has been key. And then really in terms of the working hours and environment, some flexibility, right? So work-life balance is important to us all, but particularly to some of our younger workers. So that was really the landscape, and people tended to be pre-pandemic in many ways really, really comfortable with being on site most of the time. Post-pandemic, as we move out of the pandemic, really some of the needs and wants of employees have changed based on what they've learned from being off-site. Even if they're off-site for a short amount of time, we've learned some things. They certainly want equipment and technology at their fingertips to be used wherever they want. No doubt about that. They really want a lot of collaboration tools, whether that's things like Slack or other instant messaging services, or whether that's things like OneNote, which is a collaboration tool from Microsoft. So those things have become really important to be able to figure out how to maintain connections. And then certainly in terms of time and working hours, employees really have settled into remote schedules in a hybrid circumstance. It tends to be what we're seeing the most, with lots of flexibility. And I'll talk more about that in just a couple of minutes. And really key is that ability to transition from home to work and work to home really quickly has been great if you've been able to work off-site on occasion. At the end of the day, the 3 C's are always important to our workers: comfort, connection, and contribution. Our employees want to do meaningful work for our organizations. Excuse me, they want to feel connected to our organizations, and they want to feel safe and comfortable and really being set up in an environment that makes it easy to do their work. Another piece we have to talk about is the landscape of the competition for talent heating up. There's several pieces that are moving and that really play into this. One certainly is the market is getting more competitive for employees. And I think many of our organizations who are trying to fill positions are really starting to see that. And offering a remote or hybrid work schedule is a selling point for many, many job seekers right now. We can see that if you take a look at some job postings, for example, on LinkedIn or other places, you will see employers starting to promote the fact that some of the positions can be done either part-time or full-time remote. Employees who have not offered up flexibility to employees in the past are starting to feel some pressure from employees to do so. And again, this all depends on what type of work environment you have. What does your organization do? At C&B, we have kind of 2 worlds of workers. We have those workers that are in our retail branches and have had to be on site this whole time, and a million props to them. And then we have another set of workers that we really wanted to reduce the density of our employees, and we ask them or encourage them to work remotely and off-site at least part of the time, if not all of the time. So those employees that have gotten used to that really feel like, hey, that was a good gig and I want to keep it going. And finally, when we're talking about competition, we can't not talk about minimum wage increases that have been ratcheting up over the last few years, and then some of the movement at the federal level to bring minimum wage up completely to $15 an hour is putting some pressure, particularly on smaller employers. I see you and I feel your pain, and that really put some creativity on smaller employers to think about what other benefits can we give to employees, because we know that salaries are going to cost us more. What else can we do to keep employees interested in us as an employer? So next, by the numbers, I wanted to share some stats with you. About 70% of firms, from little tiny companies to big corporations, plan to move towards some type of hybrid working environment. There's an example on the second paragraph there that big global company, Fujitsu, did a poll before the pandemic started by coincidence, asking them where they thought that they, where did they think the best place to work was, home or at work? And 74% of them said the best place for them to work was at work. Interestingly enough, when they polled employees a few months later after the pandemic was really up and going in so many unfortunate ways, only 15% of their employees then responded that being at the workplace was where they felt like they could do their best work. Certainly that has to do with safety concerns and lots of other things, but it's really interesting. Another survey that Harvard Business Review had posted was how often do workers want to work from home? And nearly a third of them said they never really want to go back to the office, which is very interesting. And then there's a whole mix of whether somebody wants to be on site 1 day a week, 2 days a week, 3 days, 4 days, etc. So we really have created this interesting contrast in views from some employees versus what employers, senior management really want in terms of how many days somebody should report to the workplace. And you can see the stats on the screen. 55% of employees prefer working remotely at least 3 days a week. That's a very common number we're hearing, is that 3 days in, 2 days off, or not off, but out working outside of the workplace. 68% of senior leadership executives think that people should absolutely be in the office at least 3 days a week. So there's a little bit of a discrepancy there. And then there's these two quotes that I came across, and I think resonate with all of us. Really, the different thinking on the topic is, one, I treat my team like adults. They get to decide where they work as long as they get their jobs done. Getting their jobs done is important. Versus collaboration and teamwork are suffering. I need to see people to manage them. So I'm sure some of this is resonating with you, that if you're on this, listening to this call, that there are strong opinions on both sides that we as employers need to figure out where we're going to land. Spoiler alert. So this is the spoiler alert from Michelle. It's really, I believe, about balancing performance and humanity. Performance being, what do we need to do to be able to fulfill the mission of our organization and be the best organization that we can be, balanced with what do we need to do to take care of our employees so that they, when they are showing up, wherever showing up means, that they are effective, productive, collaborating with others, and being the best that they could be. So it's about the balance, and it's also about how are we managing transitions now. A really good friend shared this slide with me, who is a therapist and talks a lot about transitions with her own clients. And transitions are really the movement, passage, or change from one place to another, one state to another, one concept to another, correct? And we have employees that are thinking about the transition of starting to return to work or figuring that out. They are super excited. But we also have a whole group of employees that are not so excited because they have settled into their routine. And when we go through and we're talking about a transition, then that is changing what the status quo is and shaking things up. So we have to be really sensitive to that piece. I love this phrase, we need to focus on using generous assumptions with others. Everyone has a story, that's for sure. So we don't know who may have a relative at home who can't get vaccinated because of an underlying health condition, and that person is really fearful that they're going to contract COVID. We don't know who is really struggling with daycare issues or other challenges, right? So I think that we need to remember that, but then also remember that we have organizations to run and we need people. So how do we walk through those two things? So I'm going to switch gears for just a moment and talk about how words matter and some different iterations of work arrangements, because we throw a lot of these terms out, and I want to make sure that we all really understand what we're talking about. So 100% fully on-site work, clearly this is an easy one to understand. Your employees work for you at their assigned work location all of the time. And that assigned work location could be between a few different locations, but they're not doing anything for you that doesn't fall within one of their four walls at one of their sites. 100% fully remote work is they are not on your work site locations at all, or very limited amounts. They are working from a home base, which could be their home or could be some other location. And so that's 100% fully remote. A little caveat with that is that when we have these kinds of arrangements, we still have to think about, well, when do they have to come on site? For example, do they come on site for the monthly staff meeting? Can they come on site, or are they actually working from a different state? So those are some things to keep in mind. And then we have this concept of a hybrid or a blended work arrangement. Some on-site, some off-site, or remote. In those circumstances, the person may or may not have a designated work location on your premises. So for example, you might have someone who works 3 days on-site and 2 days off-site, and they still have an office or a cubicle at your location. Or you may have someone that works 1 day on-site and 4 days off-site, and their designated work location's really their home, and so that's where their equipment and their major items are housed, the things that they need to do their job. So those are really those two pieces. The other piece that comes into play is the flexible work piece. And so an easy way to explain that is if you have somebody working a 40-hour work week and you allow them to work 4 10-hour days instead of 5 8-hour days, then they're participating in flexible work. Or if you let them start their day at 7 a.m. instead of 9 a.m. and work their 8 hours, that's another version of flexible work. So that's really the ability to do what they need to do to get their work done within a set number of hours. That could be done either on-site or off-site. So it could be done fully remote, could be done fully on-site, or could be done in a hybrid blend. So that flexibility is really, I think, a piece of the equation when we're thinking about hybrid schedules is, what are we really talking about? Are there core hours, for example, that you really want all of your employees to be working so they have the opportunity to collaborate? So core hours could be something like 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Everyone must be working during those hours. And then there are extra hours for the day. You can do them on the weekends. You can do them in the evening, those kinds of things. So there's some definitional things. Another way to look at that is work arrangements in terms of place and time. This is a great graph from Harvard Business Review again. Highly recommend if you don't have a subscription. On the bottom is a time continuum. That's the x-axis, and then on the y-axis is a place continuum. So thinking about where you plot people out, are they in that traditional office space of 9 to 5 in that lower left corner? But then if you move it up, they're 9 to 5, but they can work anywhere. Or if you move to the right, they are in the office anytime, but they're still in the office. So working in the office from 9 to 5 clearly used to be the norm for a lot of organizations, or 8 to 5 with an hour lunch, however that shook out, with some limited flexibility. Really, the pandemic has obviously upended this model. And a lot of employers are finding their employees really can work from different locations very easily. So let's move into some of the positives of remote or hybrid work. You'll see some pictures over on the right side of the screen. I will share that some of those pictures are reasons why I like working off-site a day or two on occasion. So we'll talk about those in a minute, but ability to recruit and retain top talent, a little typo there, could be seen as a positive, right? We may be able to get some workers working for us that we wouldn't have had access to before. And that ties in with the second bullet. We may have the opportunity to increase our diversity. And the more diverse the workforce is, the higher performance the company has or organization has, no matter what size you are or what type of organization you have. So that ability to increase diversity is huge because you can cast a wider net. Better work-life balance. You have more flexibility, less commute time, if any commute time, less meeting transition time because you can go from a meeting to a meeting, reduce costs for gas, wear and tear on your car, those kinds of things. Greater ability to take care of yourself and your family members. And I'll share some examples with the photos on that in a second. And possibly, and in many cases, increase productivity and performance because people aren't interrupting you every 5 minutes. You have some more uninterrupted time to get things done. So looking at the photos, we have the gas photo. We have the ability to throw in a load of laundry at lunch, one of my favorites because I hate doing laundry. Some of you have gotten new pets, God bless you, for over the pandemic. So you have new puppies or dogs at home. My dog is not a puppy, but he certainly is like, hey, where are you going when we're leaving the house now? The ability to throw things, in the crock pot or get them ready for dinner when you have a break. My favorite, the ease of which we can commit to working out if we don't have commute time. We just picked up, in some cases, for some people, up to an hour a day, depending on where you live, that you maybe can use for self-care. And then certainly for those of you who have younger families or are dealing with older relatives, then the ability to be there for them more easily is a pro. Some of the negatives of hybrid work, employer concerns, right? On the employer concern side, there's a real security risk in some cases of what people have when they are off-site, the kinds of confidential information they may have, how secure is their networks. So that's a real concern. Increased technology costs for people wanting to have a desktop in one place, but also a laptop, for example, or they want to have 2 office chairs if they are going back and forth for hybrid situations. Big one is reduced collaboration with team building and brainstorming. The concern that there's a loss of productivity when someone's at home because people haven't been able to have childcare. And I think that as employers, we have to understand that the last year and a half hasn't been normal, and we probably have allowed a lot of things and given our employees a lot of grace to take care of situations with kids because, quite honestly, we know they haven't been able to be at school. We know they've been in school and but they haven't been able to be physically there. So that certainly is a distraction. Lack of a way to monitor productivity and work completed is another big concern from some employers, feeling that that's going to have an impact to the culture and worrying about what I call drift. So that's that loss of connection when you don't see someone on a regular basis. And some of us can relate this to not seeing a really good friend or a family member for a long time. You have to kind of work a little bit harder to kind of connect in some of those circumstances. That drift can happen as well on site when you don't see people regularly. Employees are also concerned about the fear of missing out. So FOMO, if you don't know what that stands for, and you see that being chatted around or on social media, fear of missing out. And that has to do with a few things. One, sometimes if you have an organization where some of your employees are on site but some of them are off-site, that on-site group may be the in group, and the people that aren't there might start to feel like they're the out group, and out of sight, out of mind. So if you're a supervisor and you have a couple people you see all the time, you may not even thinking about it, may start to give certain kind of work to those individuals that are front and center, and kind of forget about or have those others not be top of mind. Certainly working remotely for some of our employees has actually been a very lonely experience. And we of course are happy to have them back on site for us here at C&B, but they may not have anybody at home, and that can be really tough. Less ability to network and to build those connections that may get you a new position at some point. Certainly a negative is Zoom fatigue. I mean, enough said, we all understand that. We kidding around here also throw in no free coffee at home. You know, some of our workplaces do have some perks on occasion where, you know, you get a cup of coffee, or there may be some other perk that you don't have at home. And finally, you know, a negative of requiring people for sure to work off-site, even in a hybrid format, could be that someone's situation just isn't great at home, and that can be really tough. You know, not everyone's home life is fabulous, so a safer space may be the on-site place. So key considerations for you to think about. Number one, does it have to be all or nothing, right? I think a hybrid mix with some flexibility, if it makes sense for what that person does in their position, is really, really a great idea. I feel like if you are a supervisor, you should probably be on site with your employees for your one-on-ones or some regular meetings. That's my personal belief. So I think a hybrid mix is really important. Is 100% remote really 100% remote? What expectations do you have for employees to be on site on occasion? How much notice will you give people? Right? So we'd like to think that when people are working, for example, and they have small children, that they have daycare arrangements, even if they're working off-site, so that they can focus and get their job done. But if we're giving some leeway to that, and someone has to make arrangements, how much notice are you going to give? Will you have required times where everyone needs to be on site at the same time, and how do you manage through that, even from a space perspective? So if you have a handful of employees that don't have a designated workstation and you want them all on site, where are you going to put them? And you know, how will you manage through those? A great suggestion that some employers are doing is they're trying to make sure their team has a couple of overlap days, so that collaboration and connections can be made during that time. Easier to schedule if you're a smaller organization and have a small team. You say, you know, everyone has to be in on Mondays and Tuesdays, and Jan, you take, or, you know, Tuesdays and Wednesdays, Jan, you know, you can take being on site your additional day as Mondays, someone else's additional day as Thursdays. A little bit more tricky when you have larger staffs to schedule all of that. How will you handle new hires? We had someone in our department that started literally 2 weeks before we shut down the non-essential branch personnel. So, you know, how do you figure out how you're going to train somebody if they're not there all the time? Will you have them come in now for a month of training and determine if they're okay to work off-site? Do you have the philosophy or general guidelines of that you have to earn the privilege, right? Some employers have that mindset that, you know, listen, we'll entertain hybrid, but we want to make sure that we know you and your work is great before we do that. And then that leads into, and how will you handle poor performers? Are they poorly performing because they're off-site, or they're just a poor performer in general, and you have to work through that as a manager? Other key considerations: how do you monitor how your culture feels and what's happening? I put 2 quick suggestions up there. I mean, I certainly think if you're a smaller organization, you have your one-on-one meetings and you ask them, how does it feel to work here? What can we do to make your job easier? Ask them those kinds of questions. You could also survey your employees and ask them those questions regarding how they're feeling about their work environment. Do they feel safe? Do they feel like it's productive? And what do they need? How do you ensure those connections are being built between your off-site and your on-site workers, even if there's a hybrid situation? And again, that has to go with like the in group and the out group. How are you managing through that? A big one for a lot of us is if you allow a lot of hybrid work or virtual work, how do you stop those people who are working off-site from feeling like they're always on? There's a natural break when you work on-site, when you leave for the day, to kind of switch into home mode. But when you're at home all the time, sometimes there isn't that switch. So what kinds of parameters might you put around that? What boundaries are you setting up? Are you saying you can't, you shouldn't email people after a certain time, for example, or, those kinds of things? How do you replace those really important relationship building water cooler conversations or dialogue that happens before a meeting or after a meeting? Those things are really important. So how do you make sure we do that? And that ties in, how do you make sure that the connections are really strong so there isn't any fear of missing out? How do we ensure supervisors are really supervising their employees, right? So often we'll have a situation come up where there's an employee relations performance issue, but is the supervisor really doing what they need to do to monitor and oversight? And is it really because the person's off-site, or is it really because the supervisor needs some additional supervisory skills, for example? How will we deal with feelings of unfairness from people that are off-site versus on-site? Because there are certain positions that no matter how you slice and dice it, they need to be on-site all the time. A receptionist, for example, probably needs to be on-site all the time. Our branch personnel working in our branches obviously need to be on-site. So how do you make sure that there's not unnecessary tension between groups of people that need to be there and those that have the ability because of their jobs to do work virtually or in some kind of hybrid situation? What policies do you set? Do you create a formal work from home policy? And there's plenty of them out there for you to look at. So if you need one, you can certainly even send me an email, and I'll share some policies with you. My email is mpedzik@cnbank.com. So and the United Way can get it for you too if you want a policy. Let them know. But what policies or rules do you want to set, and do they need to be written? Another really great exercise is to think about what parts of our jobs are best accomplished where. So for example, in my role as head of HR, there are certain parts of my job that if I'm working, for example, on a strategic plan or on succession planning documentation or something like that, I can do it wherever. But if I'm having an employee relations conversation where, I'm helping with discipline or termination, clearly there's a place for me to do that. So I've given you a lot to think about, and I'm hoping that you found this really valuable. I want to kind of share some final sort of thoughts or ideas and strategies for you to really keep in mind. Number one, leaders set the tone and the culture. So make sure you and your leaders in your organization are modeling the behaviors that you want. So if you are telling your staff that they need to be there 3 days on site and 2 days off site, but a leader isn't following kind of the same social contract you're setting up, that can be problematic. Offer as much flexibility as possible, right? One size doesn't fit all. Depends on what you do and whether you allow additional flexibility. Managers need to manage their employees no matter where they sit. Right? #truth. Our managers and supervisors need to supervise. So in some cases, it's not really about having a butt in the seat in front of them. It's really about managers knowing and having the skills on how to work through tough conversations. Remember to balance the performance with humanity, right? We're all people, so we want to make sure that we do that. And another piece to that, we do have some employees at our organizations that do have underlying health conditions. So you want to work through what that person's work schedule might look like with them, and based on what guidance they may have from their healthcare provider. So we do have some situations where employees do have a reason why they can't be on site all the time, and because we can accommodate that, we can keep them employed. Think about, instead of denying a hybrid remote work request, allowing an employee to do so on a trial basis, and really asking them, how are you going to make this work? What are some things you're going to commit to? Focus on maximizing productivity and collaboration while ensuring personal well-being. That again ties into the performance and humanity. We want to make sure people are doing what they need to do, and we're accomplishing our mission. But we also want to make sure we're balancing that out with some good wellness things for our employees, because healthy employees make great employees. I love this idea. Consider creating a work from home pledge that specifies how employees are going to support each other when there's hybrid schedules or people not on site, how they're going to stay connected. I would do that as a group exercise with your team. We're going to embark on allowing people to work 3 days on site, 2 days off site on a trial basis. Team, tell me, how are we going to make this work? How can we support each other in this adventure, should you choose to do that? And really creating those episodic in-person gatherings to really rebuild bonds and to really socialize new employees. We do know on occasion that some of our employees don't always get along together when they're on site, and having a break and having space from each other can be good in some ways, but also can be tough in some ways when they've lost some ground maybe that they had gained in an earlier situation. So keep that in mind as well. So that really concludes my presentation on things that I want you as an employer to think about when it comes to thinking about what you want your work environment to look like as you move forward. And certainly we know this isn't easy, and it can be challenging, but I do think that the days of returning back to exactly what things look like are probably, we're not going to return to the past. So how do we take the best of what we've learned with people being in and out of the office and combine that with what was really great about our own cultures before, and think about how we can build even better organizations? So thank you. Again, if you have any questions and you want to reach out to me, my email is mpedzich, PEDZICH, @cnbank.com. You are welcome to reach out to me. If you've made it this far, thank you for your time, and I certainly hope to see a lot of you in the community soon in person. All right, take care. Bye-bye.